जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य स्तोत्र सत अभय चरण अरविंद भक्ति वेदांता स्वामी प्रभुपाद की जय। जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य स्तोत्र सत अभय चरण अरविंद जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य श्री श्रीमद् भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती ठाकुर गोस्वामी महाराज प्रभुपाद की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। ग्रंथ राज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय। निताय गौर प्रेमानंदी हरि हरि बोल। ऑल ग्लोरीज टू द assembled devotees हरे कृष्णा। ऑल ग्लोरीज टू द assembled devotees हरे कृष्णा। ऑल ग्लोरीज टू द assembled devotees हरे कृष्णा। ऑल ग्लोरीज टू श्री श्री गुरु एंड गौरंग। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। हरे कृष्णा। Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 13, The Appearance of Lord Varaha. Today we have text 5. Shri Sukha Uvacha Iti Bruvanam Viduram Vinitam सहस्रशीर्ष्णश्चरणोपदानम् प्रहृष्टरोमा भगवत्कथायां प्रणीयमानो मुनिरभ्यचष्ट। श्रीशुक उवाच इति ब्रुवाणं विदुरं विनीतं सहस्रशीर्ष्णश्चरणोपधानम् प्रहृष्टरोम भगवत्कथायां प्रणीयमानो मुनिरभ्यचष्ट। श्रीशुक उवाच इति ब्रुवाणं विदुरं विनीतं सहस्रशीर्ष्णश्चरणोपधानम् प्रहृष्टरोम भगवत्कथायां प्रणीयमानो मुनिरभ्यचष्ट। श्रीशुक उवाच इति ब्रुवाणं विदुरं विनीतं सहस्रशीर्ष्णश्चरणोपधानम् प्रहृष्टरोमा भगवत्कथायां प्रणीयमानो मुनिरभ्यचष्ट। श्रीशुक उवाच इति ब्रुवाणं विदुरं विनीतं सहस्रशीर्ष्णश्चरणोपधानम् Hrishtaro ma bhagavat kathayam aniyamano Shri Sukha vacha iti bhuvanam viduram vinitam sashna shirakaram prahishtama bhagavat kathayam aniyamano munirabhitashta Mataji please. Shri Sukha vacha iti bhuvanam viduram vinitam aniyamano munirabhitashta Shri Sukha vacha iti bhuvanam viduram vinitam Prahishtaro bhagavat kathayam aniyamano munirabhitashta Shri Sukha vacha Shri Sukadev Goswami said, iti thus Bhuvanam speaking Viduram unto Vidura Vinitam very gentle Sahasra Shishna the personality of Godhead Krishna Charana lotus feet Upadhanam pillow Prahrishtaroma hair standing in ecstasy Bhagavat in relationship with the personality of Godhead Kathayam in the words Praniyamana being influenced by such spirit Munihi the sage Abhyachasta attempted to speak. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Abhay Charnarvind Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Translation Shri Sukadev Goswami said, the personality of Godhead, Shri Krishna, was pleased to place his lotus feet on the lap of Vidura because Vidura was very meek and gentle. The sage Maitreya was very pleased with Vidura's words and being influenced by his spirit, he attempted to speak. Purport. The word Sahasra Shishna is very significant. One who has diverse energies and activities and a wonderful brain is known as the Sahasra Shishna. This qualification is applicable only to the personality of Godhead, Shri Krishna, and no one else. The personality of Godhead was pleased to dine sometimes with Vidura at his home, and while resting he placed his lotus feet on the lap of Vidura. Maitreya was inspired by the thought of Vidura's wonderful fortune. The hairs of his body stood on end, and he was pleased to narrate the topics of the personality of Godhead with great delight. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namah Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gora Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakalpatarubhyasya kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavnebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Hare Krishna. After a wonderful weekend with Vaisheshika Prabhu, hearing lots of wonderful pastimes, now we are hearing from Vidura and Maitreya continuing. So in this verse there are few points that I found were very interesting. Maybe share some of those. And we can see it, Vidura and Maitreya, they are teaching us how devotees who actually have love for Krishna, when they have talks about Krishna, they have ecstatic feelings, and we can see, and just out of those ecstatic feelings, out of pure love for Krishna, they just relish having these kind of talks. In Bhagavad Gita we hear Machitta Madgat Prana Bodhyanta Parasparam Kathantas Chamam Nityam Tushyanti Cha Ramanti Cha. So for sadhakas it may not be so relishing to hear. Many times we see some people even go to sleep in the class, because we can see we do not have that kind of love for Krishna, and we are not necessarily experiencing ecstatic symptoms. But by hearing Bhagavatam we can see there are personalities like that who gets great pleasure by having these kind of talks, and it's so pleasurable for them just to have these kind of talks, and they cannot think of talking about anything else other than Krishna. So we hear fortunate position of Vidura. Maitreya Muni, he's amazed to think of the fortunate position of Vidura. Actually, we will hear from Shonaka Rishi in chapter 20th of this canto, few chapters ahead from where we are now, and he actually says Vidura, he is a Mahabhagavat. It's a text too. This is what he is saying: Shata Mahabhagavata Krishna Shekantika Suhrit Yas Tatya Jagarajam Krishne Sapatyam Agavan iti. Shonaka Rishi inquired about Vidura, who was a great devotee and friend of Lord Krishna, and who gave up the company of his elder brother because the latter, along with his sons, played tricks against the desires of the Lord. So in the purport we can read, Srila Prabhupada, he mentions that Vidura, he didn't really leave Dhritarashtra or the palace just because Duryodhana insulted him. The main reason for him leaving the palace it was that because they didn't cooperate with the desires of the Lord, because Lord Krishna, he went to talk to them about making peace with the Pandavas, but they didn't agree. So it's mentioned here, that was the main reason. And Srila Prabhupada mentions that's how a devotee acts. When you see that the people, they are not following the desires of the Lord, that's not a fit place to stay at. And we can see how in the community, it makes sense why devotees have these kind of discussions with other devotees, because one cannot discuss these kind of things with a person who is not in that kind of mood, because it wouldn't just create those kind of ecstatic feelings, like how Maitreya, he's just thinking of the good fortune of Vidura. He's just experiencing so much pleasure, and he's thinking he's a perfect person to talk about these kind of topics with. So here he is continuing, and this is Shonaka Rishi still going on. He is saying it will help us the position of Vidura. He's actually, if we can remember, who is father of Vidura? It's Vyasadeva. He's the seminal father of Vidura, and of course he was born of a maidservant. So he's considered a Shudra with the caste system, if we see. But it's mentioned that he has all the qualities. He's as powerful as Vyasadeva because he's born of him. He's his son, and that's what is. So Shonaka Rishi, he is discussing this such a amazing position of Vidura. But if we consider the past life of Vidura, he is actually Yamaraj, is one of the Mahajans. Mahajanoyena Gata Sapanta. So a devotee follows the Mahajan. Now, if we consider position of Maitreya Muni, he also personally heard from Krishna. And even when Vidura wanted to hear from Uddhava, Uddhava did not speak much. He told him that no, Maitreya Muni is specially appointed to speak with you. So you have to go to him. And that's how we see this Vidura and Maitreya. They are having these wonderful discussions, giving us these transcendental insights on the pastimes of the Lord. And in this chapter specifically, they will be discussing about appearance of Lord Varaha. So in Chaitanya Charitamrita, there is this verse, Brahmand Brahmite Kone Bhagyavan Jeev, Guru Krishna Prasade Paya Bhakti Lata Bij. So there, Prabhupada translates Bhagyavan as the most fortunate. So here we see Maitreya Muni is also thinking of the fortunate position of Vidura. What is his fortunate position? It's mentioned in the verse here. Krishna, sometimes he would go and dine at his place. And we can see so many yogis, transcendentalists, they meditate on the lotus feet of Krishna for like thousands and millions of years. But here there is Vidura. Krishna is going to dine at his place. And in this verse specifically it's mentioned the personality of Godhead Shri Krishna was pleased to place his lotus feet on the lap of Vidura, because Vidura was very meek and gentle. So this is one of the qualities. There are many qualities of devotees, and humility is one of them, which certainly attracts everyone. And here Krishna is pleased with those qualities. In Prahlad Maharaj, in the 5th canto, he's saying some prayers with the residents of Jambudvip. And one of the prayers is where they glorify the position of the devotees. So, one sec. If I can find it. Yeah. Yat sangalabdam nijvirya vaibhavam तीर्थम मोहो संस्पृष्टाम हि मानसम हरति अजो अंतश्रुतभिर्गतोऽङ्गजं कौवाय न सेवेत मुकुंद विक्रमम. By associating with persons for whom the personality of Godhead, Mukunda, is the all in all, one can hear of his powerful activities and soon come to understand them. The activities of Mukunda are so potent that simply by hearing of them, one immediately associates with the Lord. Do we know any other person? Just by talking about them, we feel like we are associating with that person. So, hearing about Krishna is very powerful, and it's talked about so much in Srimad Bhagavatam. By associating with the activities of Mukunda are so potent that simply by hearing of them, one immediately associates with the Lord. For a person who constantly and very eagerly hears narrations of the Lord's powerful activities, the absolute truth, the personality of Godhead, in the form of sound vibrations, enters within his heart and cleanses it of all contamination. On the other hand, although bathing in the Ganges diminishes bodily contaminations and infections, this process and the process of visiting holy places can cleanse the heart only after a long time. And in the next Prahlad Maharaj, he says, Yashasti bhaktir bhagavati akinchana sarver gunes tatra samasate sura harava bhaktasya kuto mahadgana manorathe nasati dhyavato bahi. So here Prahlad is saying that one who becomes a devotee, he naturally develops all the good qualities even of the demigods. But Harava Bhaktasya, one who is not a devotee, they do not have any good qualities, because the reason given is because they will be engaged in the service of the Lord's external energies due to being on the mental platform. So by engaging in talks about Krishna, one goes beyond mental platform. One develops bhakti, one develops love for Krishna, one transcends bodily, mental limitations, and that's how one can experience what Vidura and Maitreya is experiencing. So, Brahmand Brahmite Kone Bhagyavan Jeev. So, Bhagyavan, to become most fortunate, one has to approach a devotee like this. And that's why Vidura, he is already a Mahabhagavat. He do not have to do that. But because devotees, they get pleasure by engaging in talks about Krishna, and to engage in a talk, there has to be another person. So that's how Vidura, he meets Maitreya Muni, and it's a pleasure activity for them. So the devotees, they are very fortunate because they have come to know about Krishna, to have this opportunity to engage in hearing about Krishna, talking about Krishna. And this is all happening by the mercy of Lord Chaitanya. In explaining Shiksha Ashtaka, Lord Chaitanya says, Cheto darpana marjanam bhava mahadavagni nirvapanam Shreya Kerava Chandrika Vitarnam Vidya Vadu Jivanam Anandam Buddhivardhanam Pratipadam Purnamrita Swadanam Sarvatma Snapanam Param Vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam. So Lord Chaitanya he's explaining that the most efficient way to help living beings is to organize this Sankirtan, chanting of the holy names of the Lord. And what it will do is Shreya Kerava Chandrika Vitaranam. Shreya means good fortune. Kerava means the white lotus. So it'll spread that white lotus of good fortune, and people will become fortunate by engaging in this activity. So by mercy of Lord Chaitanya, this is happening, and we have become fortunate to get in touch with Mahabhagavat, Srila Prabhupada, and of course we have even more fortune because we even have the association of disciples of Srila Prabhupada who have carried on this wonderful mission and making others fortunate. So that's another way of being humble, because most of us have experienced and know that generally people are not interested in these kind of activities. Most people, they are not. But the devotees, they somehow or other, they try to interest those people. It could be done in various ways. Of course, here at New Dwarka, we have a great focus on book distribution and prasadam distribution, the Sankirtan, going for Harinam. So there are so many activities, especially Rath Yatra festival. So many people know about it. And by organizing these kind of activities, people, they develop some kind of interest, or at least a curiosity. And those who are a little bit innocent, they will take more interest and would become interested to find out more. So this is the plan. But how, just like another thing Vidura is expressing here is great eagerness. Now all these things are there, but we may not have that kind of eagerness just like Vidura has. And that's why Maitreya Muni, it's mentioned that the sage Maitreya was very pleased with Vidura's words, and being influenced by his spirit, he attempted to speak. In the purport is mentioned, he was pleased to narrate the topics of the personality of Godhead with great delight. So how can we develop this eagerness? Of course, easy way is to hear about these kind of personalities and associate with these kind of personalities. In one of the purports in the 7th canto, Srila Prabhupada, he mentions, giving example of Prahlad, that how Prahlad, he even refused to accept benedictions from Nrsimhadev, and Nrsimhadev offered that, I am very pleased with your devotional service and ask me for any kind of benedictions. And it's my pleasure to give benedictions. So naturally one would think, oh, it's a great time, I can ask this and that. But Prahlad wasn't like that. He was like, I do not desire any kind of benediction. But what he did, he asked Lord Nrsimhadev that, please forgive my father. He has committed so many mistakes and offenses at your lotus feet. And he told Nrsimhadev that you brought me to show pure devotional service. So considering my background, I would naturally be attracted to these kind of benedictions. So please do not bewilder me or allure me in these ways, but let me engage in the service of your pure devotee. He didn't even desire to engage in the service of the Lord directly, but he requested that he may be engaged in the service of his devotee. Tasmad amustanubritam aham asishyo agya ayu shriyam vibhavam endriyam avirinchayat nechamite vilulitam uruvikrmena kalat manopanaya mam nijbritya parshvam. Prahlad says that all these benedictions, material benedictions, they are temporary. And I personally seen this by seeing the example of my father. He became so powerful. He controlled over all the 3 planets, but he was finished within a moment. So he was saying that all these benedictions, they are temporary. I do not desire them because I've already seen the result of these things. But please be kind and engage me in the service of your devotee, Narada Muni, who gave him this knowledge of bhakti. So same way we can see how this is humility. Because Prahlad, he didn't say, oh, let me engage in service of you, Nrsimhadev, directly. Srila Prabhupada explains, a devotee, he engages in the service of the spiritual master. And that's how the service is carried on to the Lord. A devotee does not even desire to directly engage in the service. So that's humility. That's one definition of humility. But by having this eagerness to hear about Krishna, to hear about these kind of personalities, Mahajan, we can also develop this eagerness. I would like to share one prayer by Brahma, glorifying the devotees of Vrindavan. So a devotee takes pleasure in seeing other devotee is so fortunate, they are getting so much mercy of the Lord. They do not become envious, rather they take pleasure that, wow, this is so amazing, this person is getting so much mercy from the Lord. And that's what Maitreya Muni, he didn't think, oh, why did Krishna not come and dine with me? Why he's going to Vidura's place? No, he was like so happy, wow, Vidura is so fortunate. So the devotees, they because they have developed these qualities of the Lord, yashasti bhaktir bhagavati akinchana, they have become devoid of these kind of materialistic tendencies, and they have developed devotional qualities, and that's how they are able to appreciate these things. So this prayer of Brahma, he is glorifying the fortunate position of the residents of Vrindavan. It's like, how fortunate are these people? They have Krishna playing with them like a cowherd boy and engaging in these simple activities like herding the cows, going to the forest. He is hanging out with his friends in the forest, playing just like an ordinary child. So I'll just share this prayer and then maybe we can share some reflections, devotees there. Yes. Okay, yeah. Tad astu menat saburi bhago bhavetra vanyatra tuva tirascham yenahame kopi bhavajjanar jananam bhutva nisheve tav pad pallavam. My dear Lord, I therefore pray to be so fortunate that in this life as Lord Brahma or in another life, wherever I take my birth, I may be counted as one of your devotees. I pray that wherever I may be, even among the animal species, I can engage in devotional service to your lotus feet. Oh yeah, here. O Almighty Lord, how greatly fortunate are the cows and ladies of Vrindavan, the nectar of whose breast milk you have happily drunk to your full satisfaction, taking the form of their calves and children. All the Vedic sacrifices performed from time immemorial up to the present day have not given you as much satisfaction. There's a couple more. Aho bhagyam nanda gopa vrajokasam yan mitram paramanandam puranam brahma sanatanam. How greatly fortunate are Nanda Maharaj, the cowherd man, and all the other inhabitants of Vrajabhumi. There is no limit to their good fortune, because the absolute truth, the source of transcendental bliss, the eternal supreme Brahman, has become their friend. Yet, even though the extent of the good fortune of these residents of Vrindavan is inconceivable, this is just saying that demigods, they get a little piece of their good fortune because they are controller of the senses. But this is the last one. My greatest possible good fortune would be to take any birth, whatever, in this forest of Gokul, and have my head bathed by the dust falling from the lotus feet of any of its residents. Their entire life and soul is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Mukunda, the dust of whose lotus feet is still being searched for in the Vedic mantras. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says something which is good to hear. The Lord's devotees achieve their exalted position by unalloyed devotion and love. One cannot achieve such spiritual opulence by any puffed up material process of personal improvement. There are many personal improvement courses being offered outside. But that's what he's saying here. One cannot achieve such spiritual opulence by any puffed up material process of personal improvement. In Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Srila Prabhupada reveals the mind of Brahma as follows, quote, but if I am not so fortunate to take birth within the forest of Vrindavan, I beg to be allowed to take birth outside the immediate area of Vrindavan, so that when the devotees go out, they will walk over me. Even that would be great fortune for me. I am just aspiring for a birth in which I will be smeared by the dust of the devotees' feet. Vaisheshika Prabhu, he quoted this prayer, which Prahlad Maharaj said also. Neshamati stava durukramangrim sprashti anarthapgamo yadartha Mahiyasham padarajo vishekam nishkinchananam navranita yavat. A devotee is praying to be smeared in the dust of the lotus feet of a kinchana, of a pure devotee, a Mahabhagavat, because by getting that kind of abhishek, how Vaisheshika Prabhu was explaining abhishek, so by getting that kind of abhishek, we can also develop that purity that this devotee has. Is carrying this purity in his heart, because of which the Lord becomes attracted. And so he also mentioned how does one do that, is by following the instructions of that devotee. And that's what Vidura is doing also. He is hearing from Maitreya Muni, but how we heard Vidura, after we will hear in next few verses, after hearing from Maitreya sufficiently, he left and he went back to Hastinapur. Why? Because he was thinking of rectifying the mentality of his brother Dhritarashtra. He didn't go back just to, go back to palace life and have an easy, relaxed life. He went back just to help Dhritarashtra, and he even pointed out to him that this is how we can see the contrast. Here is Vidura with so much devotion qualities, and here is Dhritarashtra, who is showing great material attachments. He is telling Dhritarashtra that how can you live like this? Just imagine, just consider your position. You are eating from the hand of Bhima. Now, Bhima, Dhritarashtra wasn't very happy with Bhima, because Bhima and Duryodhana, they have a great competition. They both had equal strength, and they both were equally good at fighting with the club. And it was Bhima. Vidura pointed out, it's Bhima. He vowed to kill all your 100 sons, and still you are taking food from the hand of Bhima every day. Dhritarashtra, what's going on? How can you do this? And by hearing so strongly, he actually said, you're living like a dog at their house, just for like a few bites or few morsels of food. He said, this is not suitable to a person like you. And so the strong words of Vidura awoke Dhritarashtra's good sense, and he decided to leave. So devotees, they can do this because they are well-wishers in all conditions, and sometimes even Srila Prabhupada would speak strongly, and other times he would be soft, like the example is given, soft like a rose and hard like a thunderbolt. So there are so many qualities like this, but just by following the instructions and of course taking shelter of Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, we can understand these, appreciate these, and hopefully gradually absorb in these kind of qualities and pastimes. So thank you very much. You have a question? Brigupati Prabhu and Nika. You go first, Prabhu.
At this time when Vidura approached Dhritarashtra, this was after the war, so this was after Bhima already killed.
Yes, that's why he said that, don't you see, he killed your 100 sons. He actually vowed before, I'm going to kill all his 100 sons. So no other Pandava tried to kill any of those. It's Bhima who did that. So yeah, this is after the battle. And
thank you for a very nice class. And you did a very nice job describing what an exalted devotee Vidura is, and how fortunate he was. I think you mentioned 2 or 3 times he was so fortunate that Krishna actually came to his place to eat, right?
yes.
So my question is, why is it that when Krishna came to Vidura's place to eat, he fed him banana peels?
Oh, so it was, I was reading, there is an article on ISKCON Desire Tree. So it wasn't Vidura, it was actually his wife. And it's interesting. So she was feeding him banana peel and throwing away the fruit. And then Vidura comes and he sees, what are you doing? So he actually said, hey, what are you doing? You are feeding the peel. And then actually Krishna mentions that don't disturb her. She's in her ecstasy. So, and Krishna was actually relishing just eating that banana peel. But then when Vidura said, she came to her external consciousness, and then she started feeding the fruit, and then Krishna didn't want it. So Prabhupada says, actually, just see, Krishna wasn't hungry. He was just tasting the bhakti of the devotee. And when she offered the fruit, he didn't want to eat. And Vidura was like, oh, what did I do? So that's what I know from reading this article. Maybe you might have something more to add. No? Thank you. Nekatma Prabhu. He had.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you for a very nice class.
Hare Krishna.
Just a reflection upon Srila Prabhupada's purport, where Prabhupada so nicely defines the personality of Godhead and establishes his position. Srila Prabhupada points out that this word Sahasra Shirshna has some interesting definition of it. That there are many people who have, many beings who have energies.
Yes.
They have multifarious energies, and they may be very powerful, and they may be very active. And we read that in the pages of the Bhagavatam. There are many great personalities, whether it be demigods or demons or others, who are very, very powerful and may perform very Herculean tasks which are beyond our imagination. But they have nothing to say. And if they do open their mouth, there's nothing worth listening to. I remember going to one evening program with the Temple Bhajan Band. We went to one place in Utah, and there was one yogi there who, when he got up on the stage, and there were a lot of people, there were probably 1,000 at least. He got on the stage and he was quiet. He didn't do anything. He just sat there, and all of a sudden he started laughing. And then he laughed a little bit more. And then he kept on laughing. He'd stop and he'd laugh a little bit more. And then a few people in the crowd would start laughing. And then before you know it, a lot of people were laughing. And
It's called laughter yoga.
It was contagious, actually, and we started laughing too, for whatever reason. We had something to laugh about too. But when I asked, after the program, I asked one of the followers, what is your philosophy? They said, well, we really don't, it's just whatever you feel. Whatever you feel like doing. Some people were dancing, some people were laughing. But as soon as he opened, he had nothing to say, really, of any use. So there are many persons who have energies, and their activities may be quite amazing, but they have nothing to say. And then there are others who talk a lot, but they do nothing. And we also have that experience, isn't it? There's so many persons who like to talk a lot, and they, their words are quite Veda-vada-rata parta. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, they're Veda-vada-ratas. They're very expert at speaking, and they know all the shlokas, they know all the mantras, but they do nothing. But here, Srila Prabhupada points out that this word, Sahasra Shirshna, it applies to the personality of Godhead, because not only can he perform wonderful activities, but when he speaks, he has, as Prabhupada defined here, a wonderful brain.
Yes.
So, and this only applies to the personality of Godhead. Others, they may claim to be like this or like that, but they have nothing to say of any use. And some have speak to or act in some useless way. Just like a small child, it acts it's quite active. There's an age called the terrible twos, and they're quite active, but they have nothing to say. There's nothing useful there. So it was just an interesting way that Prabhupada defined this. That the personality of Godhead is not only are his activities wonderful, rukrama, he's described, one who performs wonderful activities, but he can also speak very wonderfully because he has a wonderful brain. Therefore we have Bhagavad Gita. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. Jai. Granth Raj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.